need to
She
smarten
doesn't-
up.
she
We need to
doesn't know.
smarten up. I know, but that's why we need to teach.
Yeah.
All right, we've already called the meeting to order. I need a, is there any emergent items to be added to the agenda? Administration?
Thank you, Your Worship. Under item 11, items directly related to council, we do have a notice of motion from Councillor Sobel, which should be 11.1.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So much.
Councillor Cox moved the confirmation of the agenda as amended. All in favor? So moved. Delegations, no presentations. 5.1, Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Tracy.
Right. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So this evening, we are bringing forward to Council the final draft of the Recreation and Culture Master Plan. As Council may remember, in 2019, we approved funds to conduct a 10-year Recreation, Culture, and Facilities Master Plan with support from RC Strategies plus PERC consulting firm. This evening, Rob Parks from RC Strategies will be walking Council through the final draft of the master plan that we are presenting for adoption this evening. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Tracy, and it's a pleasure to see everybody here again. I don't think it's quite too late to say Happy New Year, but probably if it's tomorrow night, it might be a little bit late for that. So first off, just want to pass on some regrets from a couple of people that you've seen along the way. So one is Charlene Walbeck-Minke, so she's unable to come tonight, and but passed on her best. And then Mike Roma, my colleague, my partner at the firm as well, was unable to be here, but they send their regards to you. Pleased to be here for really the final presentation of the plan. And we started it almost, I think, a year ago to this date, and started it. We met with Tracy. She was there for a conference in Edmonton, and we met with her, and just seemed to be really cold at that point too. And anyway, we've come a long way, and there's been a lot of participation from all kinds of people, and I just wanted to acknowledge that off the bat. For sure, a lot of people from the community. So we had lots of different individuals who participated in a variety of different ways. We had different organizations and community groups that participated. Administration was a key, I'm going to say combatant in all of this, but contributor to this, and then obviously council. And I would say that while sometimes it may have felt like there was a lot happening and you were sort of wondering maybe what was going on, I do think at the end when I reflect back on it that I think that you as a council had a significant role in this, and I think that you actually contributed to something that I hope you're as proud of as we are. I think that the product we have is significantly better because of your involvement, so thanks for that. And then the last mention I wanted to make was a committee. So we did have a committee involved, and there was some representation from your council on that committee. There was some representation from the county as well, and then we had a number of members from the community, and so we did check in with that group on a periodic basis and rolled the draft by them as well, and that's got us to where we are here today. I do know that you have the couple of documents that I'll just reference here in your package. So my intent here through this presentation was to skip through it, I think, fairly quickly. I think you know the content. And if you read it over quite thoroughly most recently, you might even know it better than me, and I'll take that as a compliment. So what I wanted to do was four main things. What is a rec master plan? You know what it is, but I just think it's good to just kind of remind you what it is, and then we have some people here today in the gallery who may not be as familiar with it as you are, and it, I think, positions it for them when they go on through and read it. Just a reminder on what we did to get to the recommendations in the plan. There were a couple of things that happened when we went from draft to final, so we're at the final stage here today, and really since we met with you. And then quickly, I'm just going to go through the recommendations, and I hope to be through this in possibly 10 minutes or so, and I hope that's okay with you. So what is the master plan? So it is a high-level document, and I guess when I think about this, and the image here sort of illustrates it, I think of it as the guardrails on the road. So we're setting some direction on where you're going to go, but we're not telling you exactly, what lane to drive in so much. And maybe the other analogy I use sometimes is the bumpers in bowling. So when you take your kids or grandkids bowling, there's some bumpers in there so they don't get the gutter balls. That's kind of how I see this. So there is some specificity with some of the recommendations, but we wanted to leave it in such a way that you as a town, and certainly the administration, who was probably going to be much more intimately involved in the implementation of it, it gives them a little bit of leeway on how they might actually go about implementing the recommendations that we have in there. The plan itself, you'll recognize, does have some, we call them implementation considerations, that would give some direction on maybe what we might do to put into play those different recommendations, but nonetheless, there is some room in there for the administration to make this thing come alive. I think that makes it, I don't think with this group that's much of a problem, but it does make it a little bit more palatable for some councils to accept it then, knowing that they're not signing up immediately to install this, build that, or spend this amount of money. So it guides that, and it's a 10-year plan. Interesting thing on that is, for sure it lends itself out to that, but as a community does change and demands change from your residents, et cetera, it might cause you to revisit some of it. Certainly in some of the recommendations that we have in here, and I'll point them out as I quickly walk through them, there is a bit of an onus on you as a town, and I'll say that collectively to everybody in the room here, to kind of keep their finger on the pulse of the community. And so while it's a 10-year plan, sort of suggest you need to keep checking in. Excuse me. Project input. So this is just a reminder that there were lots of pieces of research that we did. The items on the brown down below are the engagement ones, which often people find particularly interesting, and really that's where we had those conversations with members of your community through a number of different forums. All of that information together provides us with a fairly decent understanding of your community, sufficient that we're able to come up with the recommendations, and then obviously working with your administration, that committee that I referenced, and then you as a council, that really becomes a bit of a check to make sure that we've read the community corrections correctly. So we're not naive enough to assume that we know it to any great level of intimacy, but I do think at the end of a project we know it well enough to make the recommendations that we have. There are 2 documents, and that's partly why your package looked gigantic. So I had a quick little look before I came, and I thought, oh my God, 271 pages, what do you got going on? And then I realized most of it was ours. So 2 documents. One is the state of, which is the one on the left there. That's the research document. So that previous slide I showed with all those little pieces of research that we did, from some inventory work to a review of some of the documents and plans and strategies that you have. The engagement findings are all on the one on the left, and then the one on the right is about half as long, and it really gets to the brass tacks, in other words, what the recommendations are. We used to do it as one large document, and then we found out that everybody disliked it as much as we did, so we decided we'd break it apart. The other thing too is the state of document, the research one, kind of lends itself, excuse me, so other people within the administration or maybe other members of the community can actually reference it, and it sort of is a standalone for that piece, which is different than the recommendations themselves. So I did mention that we did do a couple of things since we met with you. So that was back in November. We did have a committee meeting in around that same time. I think it was actually just before we did the council review. So you kind of knew what all the punchlines were, so appreciate you hanging in here with me right now. So we did the review, went back, we looked through the document, we made some changes based on the suggestions that you had. I think we spent, if you recall the review, and I know you've had a lot of meetings, but we spoke a bit about the recommendations themselves and walked through that and had a discussion about that. And then I think you really rolled your sleeves up and we talked a fair bit about the logic model and all of that. So I'm not going to speak really much to the logic model here, but that was a big part of that meeting. We did make some revisions to the documents based on that. And then we did do a public review. So the slide is the public review part of it. We sent out invitations to all of the groups that were invited to participate in the survey and all of those who were invited to participate in the meetings and the interviews. And said, hey, come on out and we'll walk you through that. We actually don't do that a lot, but we felt, we had good participation from your community, and we thought it made sense to actually walk through it in a similar manner that we did it with you. And I do think it was appreciated, and so commendation to your administration for making that happen. Had about 24 people. There was an online review component to it, and we had one individual reply, and I thought, oh, was that wrong? I went and looked. No, it was one person, and they were sort of in agreement with what we had there, and their statement was, and it's the first time I've ever seen that, was, why would I have much to comment? It was all a bunch of experts that looked at this, and I'll take you for what your word is. So I don't know if anybody of you put it in there, but I thought that was kind of neat to see that, because nobody ever says that to us. So yeah, that's right. And there's no handwriting on that either, right? It was all electronic. So just get in quickly into the master plan. 4 different categories of recommendations. One was around service delivery. There was one series on programming, one around infrastructure that really was mainly tools and processes. And then we had a single recommendation, but it stood in its own category around data collection. So we did present a vision for recreation culture provision in Strathmore here. And this was developed through a couple of means. One was we looked through your strategic documents, and it's important that we wanted to carry it forward. And I think you may have recalled through some of the discussions we had earlier, we needed this to kind of mesh with your own strategic plans. Couldn't stand completely apart and like really different from it. So that's reflected there. But also from some of the information that we gathered through the very first kind of kickoff meeting we had, which was at Family Day. There was a bunch of pancakes going on, and I stood there and I had some graffiti boards and people wrote on them, and I have a picture of that at the end of the presentation, but we used that. So essentially it's about providing opportunities. We can't make people participate, but we want to have opportunities for them to do it individually, collectively, all of that stuff. We want people to feel like they belong to the community. I think having an identity is important, and then all of it enhancing their quality of life. All of this sort of comes back into play a little bit on that logic model, and I'll make 2 statements at the end, but I don't have it in here. So anyway, service delivery, 5 recommendations here for this. First one's about partnerships. So I guess this is a good time to make the statement that if we have it in here as a recommendation, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist now, or that the town, you as a council or your administration, are not doing these things. Sometimes it takes us to identify it in a master plan to sort of signify that it's important things. So you do have partnerships now that you're involved in, and certainly your new facility, the Motor Products Center, is an excellent example of that with the county and the school division. But we're just saying you need to continue on with those partnerships. Last time I checked, you had a finite level of resources, so you probably want to lever that, and that's what the first one is. The centralized booking process is really all about trying to make things simpler for your groups and people in the community. Nothing worse than can't get into one facility and then you got to find another phone number and another person to call, and we just think centralizing that will just make it easier for all of those groups and people in the community to participate. The communication one, it did come out of the research. Like all of these have come out of the research we did, and this one always stands out because I think it shows up in virtually every community that we do this work. One of the things that I think about it here is you've got individual groups that are trying to get people in the community to participate in their programs and services. They're doing some of their own promotion. The town's doing some of their own promotion. And once again, it's kind of almost like that centralized booking thing is, maybe we could lever all of our resources and sort of try and have more of a unified front as it comes to communications about these opportunities. The fourth one about strengthening capacity. Your not-for-profit partner groups in the community really are a significant component of your service delivery system. The nightmare scenario is all the volunteer groups and whatnot pack up and go home because they're tired of doing it. You don't want that, and it's no good for the community. So the idea here is to ensure that all of those groups are healthy and they're able to function and deliver those services. So I did mention sort of in a couple of remarks ago about keeping your finger on the pulse of the community, and that's one way to do it, or one need to do it with your community groups, is what they're going to need for help to run their organization or to make it stronger is going to change, and it can change quite rapidly. So it just talks about ongoing conversations with those groups. So the treasurer of some group leaves, Maybe you have somebody now who is trying to run their, baton twirling club, and they have nobody who knows how to manage the financial aspects of it. Well, you're not going to do it, but maybe there's a few others that have that issue, and we can do some training. And then the last one on this page is the Umbrella Organization for Arts and Culture. So we did talk to a number of those groups. This is a recommendation that did carry forward from your 2010 plan. The groups, they can learn from each other, and we actually had a discussion session where we had a bunch of the organizations together, and I mean, they could come together on their own, I guess, but they did appreciate that they were invited. They came together. They kind of learned a little bit from each other. So that's an advantage. And the other thing is it just makes it a little bit, I would say, more efficient in terms of their interaction with you as a town if you've got a body that you're working with. Programming is the second of the 4 categories. So it talks about reducing barriers. So lack of awareness and then even cost showed up as significant barriers in the survey work. So again, these might change as your community changes a little bit, so you just need to sort of stay on top of what those are and try and address it. And you can't do everything for everybody, but you might be able to address some specific ones. And maybe you'll find that, you're missing when you look at your programs and who's actually coming and participating, and you're finding, hey, we don't have any newcomers to the community in there. So then maybe that's the barrier you want to identify, and it's not sort of a broad general one, but it's what's the barrier for that particular group. Fees and charges policy, the idea there is you'll have a philosophy around how you're going to set these things. Are you looking for to increase your participation? Or are you looking to try and maybe hit some certain return on investment, or getting back a 50% return on your costs? What is it? So you'll set some of those things in there, and then the idea is you'll have a standardized approach for it, and then I would suggest it needs to be transparent. So, that's a term that everybody uses now, but essentially you just want people in the community to understand what it is behind the rationale for setting your fees. The community-wide events kind of goes back to our vision there when we talked about wanting to be a welcoming or a community that people really identify with. There's a value to having community-wide events. They're fun for sure, but they get people to connect with each other. We get them together, and I think you just recently had the hometown hockey, and that's a good example of it. The rodeo is a good example, the family day activities. So there's a reason to continue to do those things. And often when you do them, you're not really bringing any money in, but there's some real value in doing that for that sort of community sort of fabric thing. And then the last one on this page is ensuring that programs respond to community needs. Seems kind of obvious, but again, through your ongoing work with the community, you may find out that there is some needs, and it may be through some of those segments. So if I use the example of the newcomers earlier, maybe that's one that they identify a need, and so you may find it out, and there may be some of the groups in the community that could be offering that program or service that just are unaware of it. And so there's an opportunity then for the town to maybe work with some community groups to say, hey, we've identified this as a need. Is that a program or service that you can offer? And then, if there really is a gap in that, maybe for a short period of time it becomes a direct delivery from the town, and they operate a program if you feel that there's a need for it and you really wanted to respond to a community need. So that was the programming one. I've got a couple slides on infrastructure. So first one is a model to determine amenity strategy. So the idea is we've put together a framework on how you would do that, using a lot of the information that were in the was in the research document. And so you'd go through that, and it would give you a recommendation on whether you needed to enhance service in certain areas, whether you could maintain it, or whether you would decrease it. And by going through that and finding decreasing doesn't mean immediately you would close something down, but it would sort of talk there's a little process in there about what's actually happening with it. And if the community grows and we don't actually sort of enhance our level of service, that's actually talking about a decrease. So those were some of the ones that showed up through the enhancement. And then with that, you have to do some prioritization. So we don't have one thing that showed up for enhancement, and even if we did here, a few years down the road, when you rerun this model and you do it yourself, you may find that there's more than one, so you have to prioritize. All great projects, how do you prioritize? Well, we have a system in there to do that, and when we ran it through the Performing Arts Theatre and the Ice Arena, it popped up as the priorities. Kind of follows in order with that for number 12 here is then there's a project development framework. So I just said on that last slide, it was the Performing Arts Theatre and the ice arena that came up as priorities. The beauty about the framework is it tells you for the project development is that doesn't mean that you're digging a hole tomorrow and you're actually building anything. So there's a whole list of steps that you need to do, and it speaks about doing further work and research before you actually get to that point. So it shows up as a priority. By the time you get through that framework, you may actually find that it's not feasible or doesn't make sense for you to develop any one of those things now. And so there's a reason for that. And again, that can be used to communicate to your community that this is how we do things. So the fact that, you know, the ice arena showed up, and we actually heard that in our very first committee meeting here too. Hey, the ice arena is going to show up, and well, it did for us in terms of our priorities. But if we look through this whole project development framework, there's lots of work to get to before we actually say Town of Strathmore is going to build a new arena, right? So that's why we have that in there. Number 13 is about siting facilities. It's not just enough to say we have a space that you could drop something so you get to the point that you want to develop things. There's some things that you need to consider, and you could do a formal scoring thing, and we didn't do it in this case, but we just, I guess, gave you a framework for even having a conversation about it. I was mentioning to Tracy while you were sort of doing your earlier work there, we're working in another community to actually try and come up with how they would actually site facilities. And we haven't got there yet. We're having our first meeting next week about it, so it might be a disaster, and I'll ask you to forget this. But what we're trying to do there is actually trying to quantify it all. So they'll have a map, and we'll actually say, this particular site here in 15 years, that's where you're going to build this kind of facility. So I don't know if it'll work. Here, we thought, oh, that might create a bit of a problem here, but we're suggesting that there's things you need to consider. So I'll keep you updated on that if it works. 14 is the asset management. So the idea is just to take a real sort of proactive approach to managing your facilities and looking at facility condition index. So in other words, if the facility requires repairs that are significant in relation to actually replacing the facility, maybe don't pour that money. It's sort of like don't put good money after bad. So we speak about that in there. And then the last recommendation here is the data collection. And this was a real direct connection. I mean, they're all connected to the logic model, but this is saying we need to collect information to help us make decisions. And the key on this is it's being deliberate about the information we collect. So it's easy to collect information sometimes. There's often a lot of flurry about, hey, we're gathering all this, but the question is why are we gathering that information and what are we going to do with it? So the idea is to be quite purposeful with this. So that's the recommendations. So this slide, this is the visionscape thing, and I'm not expecting you to read that. I do think you have these panels. So this was set up the family day, and people came and wrote on there and told us why recreation was important to them, and got everybody from kids to seniors who did write on that. So just wanted to comment on the logic model. So that was in there as an appendix, and the idea with the logic model was it connected to the recommendations, the 15 of them there, to the goals that we have, to the master plan itself, and it sort of painted a picture on how we'd get from one to the other, and that sort of can serve as a bit of a guide as performance measures are being developed. So we have the two documents. They're going to be up. So assuming you accept them as information, they'll be done, but they'll be up on the town website, so anybody in the community can go in and look for them. So then what we did do is we just developed like a 2-minute video that I just want to show you that would give a bit of an overview to people so they could click on the video for a couple minutes and not get weighed down by all those pages of the document. So we have this developed. We're not smart enough to develop it ourselves, so then we just put a script together and we had somebody develop it. And I don't know, will the sound show?
The town of Strathmore has recently completed a Recreation and Culture Master Plan. The Master Plan is a framework with 15 recommendations that give direction as to how to provide and support the provision of recreation and culture services. A lot of research was completed and analyzed in order to develop the Master Plan. This research included community engagement. 283 households completed a questionnaire and 35 community groups participated in a survey. 30 different organizations and perspectives participated in meetings and interviews. This information provides a good understanding of the community's perspective on recreation and culture provision. All research is presented in a report entitled The State of Recreation, Culture, and Facilities. This report is available for your review on the town's website. The Recreation and Culture Master Plan is also available for you to review on the town's website. Let me provide you with a quick overview. The Master Plan is built upon a strong foundation that includes a vision of recreation and culture and 4 goals. The vision for the plan is as follows. All area residents have opportunities to participate in a variety of structured and unstructured recreation and culture activities individually, collectively, and as a family unit. Residents have pride in their community, feel a sense of belonging, and are healthy and fulfilled. The provision of recreation and cultural services enhances the quality of life of community members. The 15 recommendations are broken into 4 themes. There are 5 service delivery recommendations, 4 programming recommendations, 5 recommendations related to infrastructure, and 1 recommendation for data collection. For more information about the Recreation and Culture Master Plan, please review the 2 reports on the town's website: the State of Recreation, Culture, and Facilities, the Recreation and Culture Master Plan. Thank you for your interest in the Master Plan. We would also like to thank all members of the community who participated in the process and helped develop the Master Plan.
I mean, it's not Pixar, but anyway, we've got a little something there to, people can have a little overview. So with that, any comments or questions?
Thank you. Does anyone have anything? Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I really appreciated the plan. I like it a lot, and
Thanks.
it was I was a work in progress. There were 2 things that when I went through the report, 2 pages that I pulled out. One was page 61 of the report, and I only highlight it because it doesn't acknowledge the art centers and the arts, those performing arts pieces that you said that were in the, and if people were to look at that, they would think it was missing, but if they understand that the reason you didn't is because it isn't under Strathmore Parks and Recreation, and the information certainly carried on into other pieces of the document. The piece of information I think that brought me the most surprise was page 57 of the document, which says that 67% of our population would pay up to $100 more in taxes to see their recreation needs carried out. That was amazing to me to see that number there. And because people often say that they want more in the community, but they very rarely say that they will pay for it. So I think that one of the things that this study did was present, in your presentations to community, that you presented a process that let them know what was possible and what was, and acknowledging that they had good information to put that information together. So I think when you speak to that, it was very telling to me. I agree, your un-Pixar-like presentation probably isn't going to get the rollout that we want, but we know Ty will do it, and people will, through the types of communication that the town has done, people see their own words coming back to them in some different kind of format. But and the thing, of course, that I like the most about this is that going forward, there is nothing that we won't be able to quantify.
Right.
And I am hugely appreciative of that process. So I just want to thank you. I think this is a document that I see for the ages. I think it will serve us for many years because of its adaptability. And that's another thing that in your research and your rollout of this, that I've really appreciated that portion of it.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Thank you, Worship.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? I will finish. I really enjoyed being a part of this as a council member and actually as the member of the rec committee. I really look forward to moving on some of these items. I hope that it will put us on a better path of being more sustainable with our facilities. I wasn't surprised with a lot of the recommendations though, actually, but it's really nice to see on paper and, like Councillor Peterson said, to be able to quantify it. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm ready for a motion.
All right.
I recommend that council adopt the Town of Strathmore Recreation and Culture Master Plan, the Town of Strathmore State of Recreation, Culture and Facilities Report, and the Strathmore Recreation Master Plan Logic Model as presented.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Motion passed. Thank you. Thank you very much. There's another question.
Your Worship, if I just
You
may
bet.
add, so
Yes.
now that the plans are adopted, which we excited about, the Recreation and Culture team will be back in front of council later this year. We're aiming for May to start having those discussions about operationalizing it over the next few years and what are the priorities we want to see come out of the recommendation. So start thinking about that, and we'll be back in a few months.
Thank you. The next delegation we have Strathmore and District Egg Society. Mr. Ryan Schmidt.
Hello, thank you, Your Worship and Council. Appreciate the time you're taking to hear me out today. My name is Ryan Schmidt, and I'm the General Manager of the Agricultural Society for Strathmore and District. And with me here today are two members of our Board of Directors, our Vice President, Cara Byrne, and Director, Marlene Risden. So the purpose for being here today is to present our 5-year strategic plan. So I guess it's kind of a plan day, and it's interesting to see some of those aspects and how they tie in with some of the things we've been thinking about with the Agricultural Society. So this plan itself came together through a process of consulting our membership, drawing together ideas. They did have a survey sent out to them. Ideas came from the Board of Directors and just from the broader community. And the plan essentially combines some of those ideas that came up again and again, that these are things that people want to see the Agricultural Society taking on or getting further into or doing something about in some cases. And all that came together through our board subcommittees, and this plan was passed by our Board of Directors just at the end of 2019 and presented to our membership at our AGM in December. Just before I kind of dive in, I do want to thank the Town of Strathmore for their ongoing support for our activities. Just so you know, the support that you do give us for Strathmore Stampede, for the Celebration of Lights, and in other ways, we are using to leverage and take on new growth opportunities like what you're going to see here in the plan today. So that's very much appreciated. It does not go unnoticed by myself, our Board of Directors, or our membership, so thank you. So just a refresher on what is the mission statement of an agricultural society. So this is actually set by the Provincial Agricultural Societies Act. And the intent of agricultural societies is to encourage improvement in agriculture and in quality of life of persons living in an agricultural community by developing programs, services, and facilities based on needs in the agricultural community. So we tried to really stay true to our mission in developing this plan. So we're always trying to keep that in mind, that really as an agricultural society, we are here to represent kind of the farming and ranching heritage and that exists here today in Strathmore and District. So as we went through this, we try to stay true to some of the broader recreation activities and cultural activities that we're doing already, but as we do new things to try and make sure we're staying true to that mission. So for our strategic plan, the objective is that by 2024, we will be recognized as the premier agricultural society in the province, true to our mission, providing expanding, leading-edge agricultural programming, events and recreation with a focus on the farming and ranching heritage of the area. We've got 3 components to our vision. First, we want to provide excellence in community recreational facilities and services. Second, we want to be known as the heart of rodeo and the development of its athletes in Alberta. And third, we want to be a unique provider of practical ranching skills and education. So how are we going to go about this? This first chunk of the plan is really about making sure the things that we already do, we're doing very well. So we've got our quad baseball diamonds, we've got our campground, for example. Both of these are in need of investment, and we're going to be proceeding on some upgrade projects related to those. Secondly, we're going to complete the Remuda Link project. This is a project that's linking our current Remuda building and our LP building. What it's going to do is it's going to add a little bit of meeting space in there, and I want to recognize the cadets who have contributed to this project financially. They're going to use it a fair bit. And it's also going to add washroom facilities that are connected to our Remuda building. That's our admissions building that you go through for the tickets. And what it'll do is it'll allow us to move all the community groups that currently rent out the Quonset, which is old and cold, and move them into the Remuda building where they'll be much more comfortable. And it also just provides some additional meeting and rental space that we can use to generate revenues and increase our own financial stability. Third, we're going to commence the Cowboy Town concert series. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this coming up, but this is a new series of concerts that the Strathmore Agricultural Society will be putting on. And really along with this is just making sure we're really focused on our utilization rates. So with the facilities that we already have, before we start thinking about adding additional rental space, for example, we want to make sure we're maximizing the utilization rates on those, not just through the concerts, but through other rental activities. For the second part of this strategic plan, the Heart of Rodeo and the development of its athletes in Alberta, just this past year we launched our first ever rodeo school, and it went over very well. So we're going to expand that into next year and in the following years, adding new rodeo events to the school. Second, we have a rodeo infield expansion project that we're going to pursue. And this again goes to increasing our fiscal stability and our ability to fund our growth. This is going to be a project to revamp the announcer's booth on the east side of our infield, while also adding some private suites to that side to attract new investment to the Stampede. And third is, and this is probably the biggest project on the list, is construction of an indoor arena for year-round rodeo activities. This is really important because right now with a mission like ours, it's very agricultural related. We're hampered by the delightful weather in winter to pursue our mission year-round. So with the construction of an indoor arena, we were able to extend basically our mission to year-round capability, as it were. And third, we want to be a unique provider of practical ranching skills and education. So we're going to look to establish a practical ranching school using the land that we have just outside of town, the 160 acres that we have there. This again contributes to is really at the heart of our mission, and we'll also produce or work on this education and year-round ranching skills through that indoor arena as a facility we can use to build on this as well. So the timeline for our plan is this year that we've already commenced. We're going to be looking to solidify our finances. We're going to be taking a close look at all of our overhead and costs and focus on those utilization rates I mentioned. Really to fund our growth, we're going to need to be setting aside capital each year as well and banking that away for some of those projects in the future. But we will also pursue the baseball, year one of the baseball diamond and campground upgrades. There's going to take a few years to get all that work done. We will commence the concert series and we'll expand the rodeo school. The following year, we intend to commence the infant operations of the ranching school. By then, we'll have rolled out the full rodeo school to all events, and we'll also be doing upgrades to our playground, which is a facility used jointly by the campground and the baseball diamonds. In the following year, for 21 and 22, we will attempt to pursue the rodeo infield expansion project. Some of that work's going to start ahead of then, but that's the year we would intend to actually have construction happen. In 2022 and 2023, to mark the 50th anniversary of our agricultural society, we plan to open that indoor arena facility. And finally, in the fifth year of the strategic plan, it's really going to be about, we've done a lot of growth, it's going to be focusing again on operational efficiency, making sure that the projects we've pursued, that we're operating them in an effective way. We don't have any leaks in any of our programming, things like that, to make sure we're stable. So to speak a little bit more about the Baseball Diamonds upgrade project, I think you all know that the baseball diamonds sit on top of the former town dump. So unfortunately, one side effect of that is that as things decompose under the ground, the shape of the field tends to change over time. So we are going to be working with Strathmore Minor Ball to pursue some repairs to the field, to the grass, and also to the irrigation systems. So we're going to put our AGLC funding from the Stampede 50-50 raffle next year and the year after into that. So it's going to be a fair bit of money that we'll be able to put into that project. We're also going to seek an annual sponsor for the Diamonds just to help with funding activities there. So we'll continue to work with Strathmore Minor Ball on that. We do have a lot of softball teams that also use our fields, especially the recreational teams, but they tend to be not quite as picky about the condition of the fields. So we'll focus on working with minor ball, but certainly hear from other stakeholders. The campground upgrade and beautification project. So this is a couple of things. We do have residents that live there year-round, quite a few in fact, and so it's about making sure we're providing quality services to them. It's also about just being competitive in the campground market. So there are plenty of options around near Calgary, especially in the summertime when tourists are passing through. So we want to make sure that we're highly competitive, and so that this strong revenue source for us can continue to grow. So we are adding new energy efficient washer and dryers in through an energy efficiency grant from the province. We are going to implement new guidelines for accessory buildings and kind of what you can and can't have on your campground in your campsite to make sure that we have a beautiful place for people to stay. We are going to remove aging and dangerous trees and plant new ones. So unfortunately, with a lot of those beautiful trees in our campground, they are nearing their end of life, and it's going to take 10 years of work probably consistently working through that to take care of that. We're going to do some electrical upgrades and upgrade roads and driveways, and we are going to test out building one mini cabin this summer to be kind of a glamping site for rent and see how that goes. If it works well, we'll add some more items like that. We'll also add Wi-Fi services to the campground and obtain new vending machines. So the Remuda Link project, I've mentioned that already, and some of the benefits that come with that, so I won't spend any time on that, but happy to answer questions after if you're interested. This is something I'm really excited about. So our first concert is going to be on June 6th, actually, of this year, and there'll be an announcement coming up very shortly on that. And if this goes well, our intention is to go to 2 concerts per year, perhaps the second one being associated with the Strathmore Stampede. And again, the idea here is we're going to go for some bigger name artists. It means taking a risk, but in order to do something big, you got to take risks here and there. So you'll hear some information on that shortly, and I think it will be a success, and it will be a great growth point for us as an agricultural society. So the rodeo school, I've mentioned this already. This is another exciting thing. The idea here is that this rodeo school is positioned after Strathmore Stampede, but before the high school rodeo season commences. So last year we tried to have 20 kids sign up for a junior bull riding school, and it sold out completely. We had 20 kids here and 2 bullfighters, actually one from right here in town in Strathmore, sign up for it. We had great local coaches in the Johansson brothers and Scott Schiffner teaching the school. And so the test was successful. We're going to expand it next year to all rough stock events, and after that, if it continues to succeed, we'll add the timed events in as well. And the idea is that when a kid thinks about going to rodeo school, they think about going to Strathmore. They know it's every year, it's at the same time, it's right before high school rodeo starts, and that's just what you do when you're a developing rodeo athlete. So that's the idea with the school. The rodeo infield expansion project. So we do have 12 suites already on the grandstand side of our facilities. What we're thinking of here is introducing modern suites with more amenities than we currently have in our existing suites at a higher price point. So we know there's a lot of corporations in Calgary, for example, that cannot afford a suite at Calgary Stampede. They cost $100,000. Our existing suites at Strathmore Stampede are valued at $4,000 for the Stampede. We're going to look at a price point, probably somewhere in that $10,000 to $1,000 mark, where mid-sized companies, corporate companies, would be attracted to it. It's pro rodeo. It's got all the athletes that you get at the Calgary Stampede. It's close to Calgary, and it's at a much more affordable price point. Ponoka has recently done this. They added more than, I think it was 10 or 15 new suites, and they sold them out on 10-year deals. That helped to finance the construction of the facility, and it's a similar model that we want to pursue here. This will just help with our fiscal stability and help to fund the activities of the Agri Society throughout the year, and also Strathmore Stampede. So that's really what's at the heart of this project. The indoor arena, again, this is probably, this is definitely the most challenging, and there's a series of steps we're gonna take. The first thing we need to do is prove the need. We believe there's a need for this facility. We've heard from a lot of groups that they're interested in this facility. We just need to prove that as a first step, and then in stages, I'll be reporting back to our board, and at each step, we'll take the decision whether to go further or not. It's obviously a big project, so we're gonna do it with prudence, but we're pretty excited about it. The idea here is that this has seating, probably for about 1,500 people, so that you can do events year-round. So not only will have your 4-H clubs, barrel racing, roping clubs be able to use this, but you could put on concerts in the winter, you could put on pro bull riding events, and those type of events can really fund supporting the community groups that are doing activities like 4-H. So that's the idea here, and we know it's gonna, the financing of this is gonna come from a variety of sources. First of all, we're gonna need to save up our own capital. We're gonna need some financing, and we're gonna need sponsorship as well. It'll be a lot of work to put this together, but again, this really expands our ability to pursue our mission, and so we're gonna work extremely hard on this. Practical Ranching School is probably the closest, directly at the heart of the mission. And the idea here is that this land that we have, it's currently leased out. So if we were to go ahead with this, it would be kind of a partial or full change of use of that land. And we'd actually run our own little ranch on that land. The Ag Society would run it. And we would establish a new ranching committee with local mentors from our ranching community nearby who would be on the committee that would oversee this. And we want to give an opportunity for kids who maybe they grew up in town or they grew up in the city, they have a passion for agriculture or ranching, but they don't know how they can realize entering into that space. It could also be from kids from farms and ranches that just want to come and learn. So we would look to partner with high schools or colleges on the program so that some type of certification could happen with this. But ultimately, we're going to get started either way in giving these kids the experience they need at least to then go on to a career working on nearby farms or ranches or with other ag companies. So the ranching committee is being put together this year. We'll be reaching out to sponsors to help with the infrastructure build on this and starting those conversations with high schools and colleges and taking applications at some point during this year, and we look to start work on that next spring. So these kids would come out, they'd actually be pounding posts, they'd be learning to calve, they'd be being there with the vet to learn that whole side of it. And the idea is that, it's really hands-on. There are other places that do really strong academic programs. We don't want to compete with that. That's why we call this practical. So that's something we're really excited about as an Ag Society as well. So that's my presentation. That's our 5-year plan. Thank you for hearing me out, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have about any of this.
Thank you. Any councillors have any questions or comments? Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Ryan. That's it's incredible. You guys got yourselves a busy 4 years ahead of you, but it's exciting. It's very exciting. So, 2 quick questions: will any of these projects? Do you anticipate any of these projects are going to increase? Hopefully not decrease, but increase provincial funding. Does it check off any boxes provincially?
Yeah, it will. So there is a very complicated funding formula for agricultural societies.
There is.
And the innards of how it works, I couldn't say exactly, but I know that the higher your costs are in certain categories to operate your ag society, the more funding that you do get. So we do get one of the larger amounts of funding for ag societies in the province because we do a significant amount of activities relative to some other ag societies. And so, if our operational costs were higher, some elements of that funding would increase.
Neat, excellent. And my second question has to do with the practical ranching school. So, I just trying to get this around my head as to what this is going to look like. Would this be a set amount of time that this course would run, and would the participants stay on the grounds? Is that what you're envisioning, or do you have any idea?
If you mean by staying, would they like a certain amount of time that they'd be there?
Like a 2-month course or whatever.
Yeah, so ultimately the ranching committee will determine that plan throughout this year. That's kind of job one, is to say, okay, what exactly type of operation are we going to run here? How many hours are the students going to be here? And
Gotcha.
how are we going to mentor this? So we will look at that, but we were kind of thinking of it as perhaps being a one-year program type thing where you'd be involved for a year, so you'd see the whole cycle of the ranch really, because there's certain things that only happen certain times a year, right?
Right. I think it's very exciting. Smart. I think it's a really neat idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the presentation, and I am very impressed with the direction that the organization is headed, and so I just wanted to thank you for all the changes that you've been bringing about.
Oh, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know how much I support this, and I just want you to do more, like more. One of the things that I'm really mindful about, and you referenced it when you said there's so many synergies with the rec master plan, and when our presenter talked about leveraging resources for that unified front, I see so much opportunity for the Strathmore Agricultural Society to become a leader in this. And we just attended a Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting the other night where they talked about wanting to, I think that they said between $20 and $30 billion to build tourism east of Banff and east of the Banff corridor, and how through the Strathmore Ag Society you're so well poised to do that. And so when I think about what you say in the rodeo school programs, I really wonder, and I mean maybe it's a developmental process, but I really wonder why you wouldn't do it year round. Why you wouldn't partner with Golden Hill School Division to run, if they ran quarter semesters and you brought your kids in here to do quarter semester rodeo programs, and we utilize the Siksika Arena in the interim. There are 13,000 kids registered in high school rodeo in the United States. There's another couple thousand in Canada and a couple thousand in Australia, New Zealand. Golden Hill School Division has long reach in terms of their international school program, and we could, when I spoke to the people in Albuquerque about the high school rodeo schools, and they said, well, we really need junior high too, and we know that international school programs hold homestays for junior high kids as well. Then you double that number. And one of the things that I think is really compelling when I think about competitive sports at the professional level, hockey in Canada, the Globe and Mail just reported yesterday that something like 60% of children who go through minor hockey and wind up in the NHL are kids whose parents have spent, in addition of $5,000 per summer, and I think $25,000 per year on their children's hockey. So I know that the same passion exists in rodeo families for that history, to that legacy to continue. Carl Subban was interviewed and talked about, finding $15,000 for his 3 sons to participate in a single hockey school for $5,000 each. And I think about that same passion. It exists in rodeo. You know that. Yeah. And so I really see an opportunity for, there are 1,800 sanctioned rodeos in the state, high school rodeos in the States. I'm not sure how many, very few up here, but there could be more. And so I just see this enormous capacity for this. And, through the partnership with, Standard School, Wheatland Crossing School, has capacity to do that, as do we. And I think that it would pay for that arena in short order. I really do. I know that, and then I'd like, in 7 or 8 years, I'd like to see us hosting the North American high school rodeo finals,
Yeah,
where they bring 40,000 people into community. And when I still have contact with that group, and they've often, for 20 years, they've been saying, we'd love to come to Canada. And people always go, oh God, who's going to come to Calgary? Well, I can tell you that people from here go to Albuquerque, and they pack horses. So people will go. You build it, they'll come. And so I really think that there is just enormous capacity, and I like the tack you're taking, and I love the idea of the ranching program, and Lakeland College, by the way, is also interested. We had an opportunity to speak to them recently, and they are also interested in competing with Olds for a place at your table. And so, well done, and anything that we can do to leverage those resources in terms of tourism too, I think would be fantastic. And at our Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting last night, that was certainly, or Monday night, that was certainly a priority.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the work you've done and what you've brought to the Ag Society. It's been a game changer, you have been, and I really appreciate that and the hard work you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Cox. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say thank you, Ryan. I wasn't here for your very first time that you came to council, and I'm just so thrilled to have you here and to have you speak about your strategic plan. And thank you to Kara and Marlene for coming to support you. It's so nice to see new faces, new energy. And, the 19 years I've been in Strathmore, I've seen the Strathmore Ag Society and the rodeo kind of develop like a slow burn. And what I see you providing the spark and the oxygen that we need to really make this into the fire that it could be for this town. And it has the potential to really, really take off. I love the direction that you're going with the sponsorships and multi-purposing that land. That to see that land just sit there, for most of the year unused. It's so great to see that you're thinking outside the box of other things that we can do. And agro tourism is huge right now in other provinces. And Alberta really just hasn't grabbed the opportunity or seized the opportunity and developed what we have here so that others can come and see it. And there are so many people in Europe who are just gnawing at the bit, who want to access Banff and Jasper and everything. And what we need to do is we need to just direct them, like the Corb Lund song, what is it? East of the Rockies, west of the rest, or, whatever that phrase is. I can't remember it quite. No, I'm not going to sing. But, we have ranch lands here, and we have so much to be proud of. And I love that you're doing the mini cabins. I would love to see perhaps a partnership like Councillor Peterson was saying, where you partner with Siksika and perhaps bring out some teepees and pay homage to our Indigenous population that is so close, who also support the Ag Society with so many of their events. And, I see this as being a real great starting board. And I like that you've culminated the 50th anniversary of the Strathmore Ag Society with the building of the arena, or the grand opening of the arena, hopefully, would it be. And I am looking forward to supporting you on June 6th and coming for the first cowboy concert. Are you able to give us any hints of who it may be?
No, I cannot.
No?
But if you listen closely to our local radio station, you'll hear something soon.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Now, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was told I was not allowed to be as sunny as her. So, great presentation. Thank you very, very much. Very exciting stuff. I echo some of Councillor Peterson's ag tourism concepts, and you've got me that glamping thing. But one cabin's not gonna bring in all these people. So I think I think you have something there significantly. I love the rest of it. Think you're on the right track. You're thumbs up. Just bringing us back to our roots is part of what we as a council also.
Right.
Your visioning is bang on with us as well. So kudos to you. Is that enough, Sunshine?
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, I really do think that this tourism money, and if we can, get some of them glampings going, look at community futures. There's possibility for, grants there. There's also financial aid there as well. They also have the ability to lend up to, I believe, $150,000. So, I want to get you moving in the right direction so that you can get that arena built. So I think you're on the right track. I think you're doing an awesome job. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Councillor, and thank you for the ideas too.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I guess I'll finish up. I do really like the direction of where you're going. I would like a little, I guess this is different. This is my perspective or whatever, but I went to the bike races actually there you guys had. I think not this,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Like even just a little bit of venturing out and like you say, multi-purpose and whatever we can get. Like I know Drumheller has drag races. They use cars. They have cars and I've been there a few times, you know, and it draws a different crowd. It's a new and different crowd. But I think the more that you can get there, the more money you guys can have in. I love the direction. Like everyone else has kind of mentioned, it really aligns with our kind of visioning as well. And I'm really excited for you guys and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And so on the racing, so I am able to confirm that Alberta Flat Track Racing is coming back this year. So there'll be a race July 11th and 12th. They've booked in with us and we're going to put that event on with them in July. So
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Can you let us know ahead of time? Just send us a little memo or something,
Sure.
because we have that box there, and I would love to be
Yes.
able to use it for that
Great.
purpose too.
Okay.
And invite some people out and use it in.
Excellent. Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, we're going to be doing a refresh of our website just actually in the coming week. So you'll have kind of the whole calendar of events will
Awesome.
be on there, but I'll send council a note with some things you may be interested in participating in.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Well done.
All right, no, nothing in consent agenda. Number 7, confirmation of minutes. 7.1, adoption of the special council meeting minutes for December 17th. Councillor Peterson?
I would move the minutes, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. All in favor? Motion passed. 7.2, adoption of the regular council meeting minutes for December.
Your worship, I'm not, just noticed that we've got in attendance Councillor Bauer as deputy mayor for that meeting. And it seems to me that someone was missing at that meeting. And I don't know, and the reason I say that is in regards to 9.1, there's a defeated motion with 3 members of council voting against an item.
Lorraine was missing.
No, Terry wasn't
No,
there.
I wasn't here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that explains that, so.
I was on the phone.
That's
Yes.
right, that's right. That's right, too.
Oh, no, then I was here. She was on the phone.
Yeah, I think.
You were
here, remember?
Then how could we defeat a motion
Is
with?
this on the prayer and council meeting?
Yes.
No, she wasn't here.
Okay.
I was on the phone and you were not here.
Yeah, but you were only on the phone for one motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that one.
That's right.
It couldn't be, because she missed the,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So it was Lorraine, she wasn't in attendance. I was
Sorry,
here.
So, Ms. Watson?
Your Worship, perhaps we need to take it away and bring it back if we're not sure, or we should not approve the minutes tonight. I believe that was the night we passed budget, and all of council was here
No,
at one
she phoned in,
point.
yeah.
At one
Yeah,
point.
right.
Yes.
She phoned in.
That's right.
So we'll leave.
We'll leave this for now. We can table this till next time? Okay, we'll leave this one.
You need a motion on that, Madam Clerk?
Your Worship, we'll just take it off the agenda for.
Okay. Nothing tabled. 9.1, proclamation Family Literacy Day. Is that Jen? I have to go there.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, council has received a request from the Strathmore Library to proclaim Family Literacy Day in Strathmore. The day is on January 27th, and administration is recommending the proclamation.
I got it.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Oh, gosh. Proclamation.
The now, therefore.
Now therefore, we, the Town of Strathmore Council, do hereby proclaim January 27th as Family Literacy Day in the Town of Strathmore.
Any discussion on the matter? Motion? All in favor? Motion passed. 10.1, council committee meeting minutes, January, 22nd. Any discussion on the, Councillor Bauer?
I move that council accept the council committee minutes as information.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. All in favor? Motion passed. 10.2, council reports from committees on which they sit. Councillor Peterson.
Your Worship, Councillor Cox and I sit on the Wheatland Housing Board, and the minutes are not there because our legislative services clearly hadn't received them in a timely fashion. But I would just like to report that terms of reference have been established for a building committee at this point, and that a communication committee under the auspice of the building committee has been established for items and issues relevant to the building committee. Wheatland Housing Management Board met with ministers Ahir, Scow, and Cooper, and Minister Pitt will be meeting with us in the near future. And our main goal in that meeting was to get from them a commitment to take to the legislature and to Treasury an advocacy plan for us to get planning dollars to move the project for the lodge ahead. So they did concur that was something that they would be interested in doing. They had a few asks of us as well in terms of our case, which we can easily comply with. The building committee met with the Masons and with the Wheatland Community Crisis Shelter, who presented the same thing that they presented to this council. So we see some synergies between those two, and whether or not they decide to come in with a building plan for the lodge or not, I think that the two of them are very interested in working together going forward. So it's just good to get the information out there. Wheatland County, at their meeting in early January 2020, elected to request an explanation from Strathmore Town Council as to why the town site was selected as a preferred site without prejudice. There is an explanation, of course, for this, and the explanation was given by the consultant who wrote and directed the business case for the proposed lodge. Councillor Cox was responsible for the establishment of the Communications Committee for the Wheatland Housing Board, and should their request for information come via letter to Council, it is recommended that their request be forwarded to the Communications Committee for explanation. The lodge is full, and the waiting list for social housing, this is subsidized housing, remains consistently in excess of 80 families. One other thing, the provincial government did reduce funding to social housing. The response in Strathmore was that we cut back, did a blanket reduction in the amount of subsidy, and people were incredibly understanding. Our manager of social housing said that she got questions about how much they had to pay, but not one question that was that complained or were angry. They were just very grateful that the program continued into the future. So that needs to stay on our radar, that we just have this high rate of issue relevant to that. The proposed lodge build was also a topic of discussion at the Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting, and requisitions for contributing parties were explained. So there's lots of questions. Why does the county pay such a large percentage of that requisition? So currently, the requisition amounts are guided by policy relevant to how much taxes the varying communities take in. So Rockyford, with their very, very small population, pays a very small requisition. We pay the second largest requisition. So we did talk about that. A comment made at the Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting from Reeve Link was that they've lost $135 million in tax revenue from oil wells. Interesting for us to note, with our $38 million budget, that $135 million made up 5% of their budget. So those requisitions can change. They're not written in stone. There's legislation that was brought out by Laurie Sigurdsson in the previous government that did change and shift that somewhat. So it'll be a topic for conversation into the future, for sure. And the only other thing was Councillor Bauer and I did attend the Strathmore Overnight Shelter meeting, and just with regards to the ongoing housing shortages in our community, the overnight shelter has been fully subscribed. I'm sure Councillor Bauer will talk more about about the overnight shelter, but they've been full all the time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a little bit of a report. We just met last night for the library board, the Strathmore Public Library, and the director's report will be forwarded to council to be attached to the next agenda package for our next meeting. But I did want to just point out that there's a few things that the library is doing upcoming. On May 3rd, the Hike for Hospice will be held in our community again. I believe it'll be for the third year. And the library has decided to sponsor the Hike for Hospice this year. And please just keep your calendar open for Sunday, May 3rd, if you'd like to support the Hike for Hospice. Hometown Hockey co-host Ron McLean donated his book, Hockey Towns, Untold Stories from the Heart of Canada, and he autographed a copy for the Strathmore Library. So if you wish to go and take that out, it's available for all of our residents. And he wrote in a beautiful message about Strathmore and how we're just a real unique, wonderful community. It was so nice to hear all the kind things that he said about us when they were here for Hometown Hockey. We also welcomed the director of the CALP program, Tammy Nischuk, to Strathmore, who have actually moved here for the position. I was so pleased to hear that. And she would like to pass on an invitation to everyone. On Monday, January 27th, so this Monday, they are having a fiesta-themed World Cafe, an open house and luncheon at the library to launch the CALP program, which is the Community Adult Learning Program that will be running at the library for the next year. And if you are available between 11 and 1, please join them. There are 5 volunteers already ready to go and trained for the CALP program, and we don't even have any people. Last night, there were not any people that were actually in the program that have been identified yet, even though Tammy's been working with partners and nonprofits all over Strathmore, but we already have the volunteers, which is almost unheard of. So people are really stepping forward, which is not something that I wouldn't already expect from our wonderful people in Strathmore. A SEREMA certificate, so the Strathmore Regional Emergency Management Agency, presented a certificate to the library director, and that is in recognition for the partnership that they provide with providing an emergency management space in the case of an emergency for all of us to set up, and that is the space in the library just to the right of the fireplace. That is actually an emergency space as well. And I'd like to publicly thank Brett Wilson and family for their $2,500 grant to the library, which will be used for go bags. They're called grab and go bags for the public to come into the library and just grab a book and go. Take a package of books at a certain reading level and be able to take that back home and then bring it back to the library. There's going to be quite a number of bags available in the springtime. And I'd also like to challenge the other councillors here to invite your boards, as I did. I invited the library staff and the board members to the next blanket ceremony, which will be held on February 8th. And that is being sponsored by FCSS and Town of Strathmore. And I think that is it for the library. And if I may just add on to what Councillor Peterson said about the Strathmore Overnight Shelter. We did meet, and sponsor sheets are up on the website for the walk-in from the cold. That is on March 1st. I believe that's Sunday, March 1st. And dinner will be provided for all participants. Is it a Sunday, Jen? Okay, you gave me that look, so I want to make sure. Oh, okay, you're thinking. And I'd also like to recognize Alberta Laundry and Midwest Colony for their donation of a stackable high-capacity washer and dryer for the Strathmore Overnight Shelter. It's going to help the shelter so much. We're doing laundry constantly. If you can think, being at capacity, so we have 10 people every day. We are doing sheets. We are doing client laundry. We are doing all of the towels and everything from showers, and it's just non-stop. And so to have an additional capacity washer and dryer makes so much difference. And that came out of the 25 Ways in 25 Days program that Melissa Mass was doing for the shelter. She's a board member. And it's just so nice to see people outside of Strathmore supporting us. So Alberta Laundry is from Calgary, and Midwest Colony is located just north of Chancellor or north of Standard. And they really stepped up. They're even providing food for the shelter now every week. So the clients are getting some really high quality food because we don't have an oven in the shelter. And so we've been heating everything up with toaster ovens and on the stove. And to have those roasted vegetables and those slow cooked meats is just, it's such a nice addition to that home atmosphere that Pastor Elizabeth Karp has really created at the shelter. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one very quick note that on behalf of the Strathmore District Chamber of Commerce, the 2019 Business Excellence Awards will be taking place Friday, January 31st, from starting at 6 p.m. This will offer not only support and some presentations to some really fine businesses in our community and area, but also a great Italian dinner. The theme of the event is Night in Venice. I knew it was Venice, something. A night in Venice. So there's going to be entertainment. It's going to be a great evening. Tickets available on eventbrite.ca, or you can contact the Chamber via Facebook or email, and they will get you tickets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Peterson.
I just wanted to wrap up with the Marigold report, and just very, very briefly, because I only report every quarter because that's when they meet, but in between I sit on their building committee, and they had a meeting with their new building development permit with Western Irrigation District and Marigold and the town, and things are proceeding. The town has things that they'd like to see addressed, but the town, they just expressed their intense appreciation for our town staff and their willingness to make things very manageable and to move the project ahead in a really mindful way. The Joint Facility Committee has confirmed that the design development phase are now complete and on the new build, and the completion date is set for May 2021. So that's really happy news. And so the central building space, the shared space, I think will be around 5,000 square feet. So that's a real boon for community in many, many ways. And it looks to be a very simplistic but very, very beautiful site, and looks good going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Can I have a motion to?
I would move to accept the report, the oral reports given by Council, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. All in favor? Motion passed. 11.1, notice of motion. I think Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm pleased to read this notice of motion and would request that this matter come back to Council for discussion and a possible vote on February the 5th, 2020. The notice of motion goes as follows: whereas the town of Strathmore is a welcoming community for all people regardless of gender or sexual orientation, whereas society has well established legal and ethical obligations to protect people from foreseeable risks of significant mental, emotional, and physical harm, and whereas all orders of government have a role in protecting citizens from the harms associated with this practice, and whereas the Canadian Psychological Association opposes the practice of conversion, stating that it can result in negative outcomes such as distress, anxiety, depression, negative self-image, a feeling of personal failure, difficulty sustaining relationships, and sexual dysfunction. And whereas the College of Alberta Psychologists amended the standards of practice in 2019 of October of 2019 to prohibit psychologists from providing any treatment, counseling, or behavior modification techniques with the objective of changing or modifying the sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression of an individual. And whereas neither the federal government nor the government of Alberta have yet to take any action to ban this practice, and whereas the Council of the Town of Strathmore may pass bylaws for municipal purposes respecting the safety, health, and welfare of people and the protection of people, and therefore be it resolved that the Town of Strathmore advocate to the federal and provincial governments, including having the mayor send a formal request on behalf of council to end the practice of conversion therapy procedures, and further be it resolved that council direct administration to draft a bylaw to prohibit the business practice of conversion therapy, including a fine for those advertising or offering conversion therapy services within Strathmore for council's consideration no later than June of 2020. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. So that'll come back to us at the next council meeting. All right, bylaws, 12.1, tree protection bylaw, 19-18. Renee?
Okay, that looks a little scarier maybe than it is. This is basically the bylaw that you already read through. What this is, sorry, good evening, Your Worship. I'm here this evening to present the tree protection bylaw. And, okay. And it's bylaw 1918 and the amendments to the community standards bylaw under bylaw 1910. What this is a copy with a minor edit to it to encompass all enforcement personnel within the bylaws. So in speaking with our peace officers, we had the wording changed from bylaw enforcement officer to peace officer. So that's the only change. And I have highlighted them. So if you'd like, I can tell you exactly what page they're on. That was the definition of peace officer and then just wording it to say peace officer instead of bylaw officer. Or bylaw enforcement officer, because we had a few terms with municipal officer as well in other bylaws, so we're trying to keep them all the same. So at the June 12th, 2019 meeting, administration was directed by council to create a tree protection bylaw pertaining to public trees within the town of Strathmore. That's what is actually currently driving this project, including the amendments to a community standards bylaw regarding private trees. Council has determined previously that it was desirable to enact a bylaw to prohibit the injury and destruction of public trees located on town of Strathmore lands, to prohibit the planting of public trees without town consent, and to establish requirement for payment of estimated costs for protecting these public trees. Our tagline for Strathmore is where quality of life is a way of life. Strathmore's urban forest provides many environmental, health, and economic benefits to the community, including the improvement of air quality, absorption of carbon dioxide, climate moderation, energy conservation, stormwater retention, wildlife habitat, aesthetics, and general improvement to the quality of life of all residents. So as you can see, the urban forest that we currently have in Strathmore is an important resource. We live in primarily, well, obviously the prairies. So there are not a lot of trees in the prairies. And I found personally, when you come into Strathmore, there are a lot of trees. And that's something that maybe people don't realize, but when you're in Strathmore, you don't feel like you're in the prairies. You feel like you have that tree canopy, and we have a lot of trees, especially in our park, our major park in Kinsman, which I think people enjoy. So that is definitely something worth protecting. Trees within our urban forests are a dynamic resource. They grow and they mature, they decline, and they eventually die. Seeking retention where it is feasible, while at the same time ensuring there are adequate replacements, promotes the creation of sustainable urban forests as a continued benefit to our community. And in speaking with parks, this cycle, the life-death cycle, depending on the species of tree, can be up to 100 years. So, and definitely takes, I think in my presentation here, I have damage to a tree can show up as long as 10 years in the future. So if you run over the roots of a tree, it can cause damage a decade down the road. Here we go. The purpose of tree protection bylaw is to protect Strathmore's urban forest by restricting the tree removal from public lands and ensuring replacement trees are provided when trees are required to be removed. The basic strategy involves preserving the healthy trees where possible based on their long-term viability, permitting the removal of those trees that are either in poor condition or in conflict with development, and requiring the replacement of new trees. So currently we do this with development permits. We ask that a tree be provided with every house and 2 trees for corner lots. And then we do require or ask for landscaping of all other sites, so commercial, industrial sites. And then we do have our own landscaping that is provided by the developers within boulevards that are adjacent to their properties as well. The initiative is conducive with the beautification of Strathmore, which is with a direction within the council's strategic priorities 2018 to 2021. Without a tree protection bylaw during private development projects, public trees are often harmed or lost at the town's expense. And implementation of a tree protection bylaw allows the town to retain and protect the urban forest. After a tree is established, any activity that changes the soil conditions or disturbs tree branches, trunks, or root systems can be extremely detrimental to a tree's health. Changes can be brought on by soil compaction, excavation, and altering the grade. It can take as long as 10 years for an injured tree to show signs of decline, so it's important to protect trees proactively. A tree protection plan would be submitted at the time of development permit for any development within 6 meters of a public tree. The purpose of the tree protection plan is to prevent damage to the public trees caused by development work on, near, or crossing the town property. A tree protection plan is also an agreement between the property owner and the town to protect these public trees. The agreement specifies that the owner agrees to be held accountable for any damage which may be caused to the public trees during the development process. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the tree protection plan agreement that we've drafted up to have this as a contract that would be within our amenities disclosure form that we currently use. Tree protection barriers. Before disturbance can begin, each public tree within 6 meters of a development site would require approved barriers. The barriers mark the tree protection zone in which disturbance activities are restricted. The Parks Department recommends extending the barriers to the tree protection zone to the drip line or the outer limit of the tree canopy, as shown on the image on the right. Upon approval of the tree protection plan, the town would provide signage to be affixed to the protective barrier, indicating protection of the tree and who they could contact for any questions. So tree replacement values. Trees have a calculatable market value. Trees that are small enough to be replaced with a similar sized nursery tree can easily be appraised and by determining the cost of replacement, which typically includes the cost of removing a dead tree, installation of a new tree, and then post planting care. Establishing a value for large trees is is figured out by a formula developed by the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers and accepted by professionals in the landscape and legal professions. So I've broken it down. It's in the report in a lot more detail. I can go into a little more detail if you like, but it's basically using the formula that you can see on the screen. And this is something that, speaking with Donna in Parks, she has said that's exactly how they would calculate any large trees for replacement value within town. And then heritage trees. Heritage trees are typically large individual trees with unique value, which are considered to be irreplaceable. The major criteria for heritage tree designations are age, rarity, and size, as well as aesthetics, botanical, ecological, and historical value. Heritage trees on public property within the town of Strathmore can be registered by our Parks Department and protected under the Heritage Tree Foundation of Canada. And private heritage trees can be registered by the owner. As far as I'm aware, the only heritage trees that we have are currently registered are over by the No Frills. There are some? Okay. Those, I tried to ask Donna for a list of them, and I know I talked to Rob as well. Okay, that's probably why. Administration is also bringing forward amendments to the community standards bylaw pertaining to private trees, being that private trees are not included within the tree protection bylaw. The required number of trees on private property, as I mentioned, is governed under the development permit. And an amendment to Community Standards Bylaw 1305 is requested at this time to provide notice to owners to carry out inspections, enforcement, or action authorized or required by the tree protection bylaw, or provide warnings regarding decayed, damaged, or dangerous trees, branches of trees, or shrubs if in the opinion of the municipality, primarily the Parks Department, the trees or branches which pose a danger to the health or safety of any person on a public property. So if there was a tree that overhangs a public property or had any kind of damage to it that needed to possibly be removed, we would be able to give a notice to say to the homeowner to say that there was damage or it is diseased, or because I mean personally I wouldn't know if my tree was diseased, but someone like an arborist would be able to tell that, obviously. The amendment also provides updates to definitions and the cross-reference to the tree protection bylaw. Yes, administration is bringing forward the tree protection bylaw number 1918 for first, second, and third readings in line with the council's strategic priorities for beautification and based upon the direction of council to establish a requirement for protection of public trees, to establish procedure to prohibit injury and destruction of public trees, establish replacement values, and an issuance of penalties for tampering or demolition of public trees within the town of Strathmore. Additionally, administration is bringing forward bylaw 1910 for first, second, and third readings in the form of amendments to the community standards bylaw based on the desire of council to provide regulations surrounding the safety of diseased or hazard trees on private property, to provide community education and issuance of information and notices to owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Anything? Oh, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Renee, for your work on this bylaw and for your presentation. I just have a couple questions, and the first one's going to sound a little bit stupid, but I read it over and over, and I still don't understand. The first paragraph of your bylaw statement where it says, whereas council has determined, and then the last sentence says, and to establish a requirement for payment of the town of Strathmore's estimated costs of protecting public trees. So are you actually just in the future going to estimate what it's costing us and bring that back to council, or why is that sentence in there?
At the time of writing, we don't have an established cost. No one has gone out, Parks has not gone out and said each tree has a particular cost to it. So all Donna could do at this point was to estimate the costs of a tree that may be within our town, on the town lands. So that in that case, we didn't.
So
She
is
had
that
it
being
as-
used for budget purposes, or, like, I don't really quite understand.
No,
that
it was
statement.
more so that if somebody did say damage a tree, say someone hit it with their car.
Yeah.
We don't have a cost currently for what that tree would be. So you would then estimate it based on it's not a hard number.
So it's like developing a database of trees, what their worth is, and what
If
the cost to
council-
replace it would be.
Yes,
And then the person would be charged with that if they damage the tree.
correct.
Ah, okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Ryan, did you want to add anything? Ryan?
Your worship, no, that was the intent, is we've had a number of incidents where individuals have simply cut down trees on town property and responded to staff with lack of politeness when we express concerns, to put it politically correctly. So the intent of this bylaw is to give us some teeth to deal with situations like that, and, some of these are $5,000-$10,000 assets that they're chopping down, and to be able to build them for that. That's a town-owned asset owned by the community that, people cut down to for whatever reason. So the intent is to have a consistent, defendable formula that, if bylaw issues a ticket for $8,000 for someone having chopped down a town tree, we can defend it with a methodology.
Okay, so I turned my thing off because I knew that you were going to speak and I wasn't sure if I had to do that. So may I still continue to speak, Your Worship? Thank you.
All right, keep going.
Does this bylaw also pertain to shrubs, or is that a separate bylaw? Because I'm wondering about the oyster scale and a lot of the hedges, especially in my area of Cambridge Glen. And we have so many diseased hedges that the property owners should be responsible for, but we have a lot that are not taking care of it properly.
Through the chair, there is a definition included for shrubbery, so that the intent would be that it does protect.
Okay,
The
so then
shrubs
the
as
bylaw
well.
officers would be able to go out now and talk to those property owners.
Correct.
Okay, good.
And through the chair, there is also a method where, by means of Google Maps, that if, say, someone did chop down a tree, and we have had this happen, where we don't have an inventory, that tree no longer exists, so it can't be assessed. We can actually look at previous maps and see what tree that was. I mean, and that's something that Donna can do, is assess a value based on photos or based on data that we do have. Because obviously if somebody was cutting down a tree right now, we don't have any database currently to say what that tree is worth.
Yep.
The value of it, so. that is
Google
something we
Maps can
use.
be so valuable for so many different things. I had a neighbor who was watering on a day that they weren't supposed to, and the little Google dude went by with his camera, and I made sure of forwarding her that on a consistent basis just to point out to her.
That bylaw doesn't exist.
Yeah, thank goodness. All right, my last question is, why did you go with only one tree planted on the property by the developer?
That's, through the chair, that's currently within our land use bylaw. So currently our land use bylaw says for all residential properties, they require one tree. They can provide as many trees as they want, but that one is the requirement. And two for corner sites, given that generally they would plant one in the front yard and kind of one in the side yard. I do know that that is across the board for residential. For commercial, it's calculated differently. Anything above residential, so commercial, industrial, we calculate it based on a landscaped area. So
I would love to see that changed. I would love to see more than one tree. I think that a lot of developers choose the cheapest available option for a tree, and sometimes they just plunk it in. They don't worry about the depth that they're putting it in. They don't worry about maintaining the soil properly or preparing the soil properly, and I would like to see that added into the bylaw so that we have a structure of how they're to, not just put one tree in, but how they're to plant that one tree. And that's just my own personal
through the
preference.
chair, that is something that could come back. We would have to amend the land use bylaw in regards to number of trees. In regards to tree planting methodologies, I believe that would fall probably underneath this bylaw as a future amendment, if we did want to bring
That
it
would be
back.
great, because there's a lot of one trees that are planted that die within a year. And just preparing it properly and for us to just let the developer know how we are trying to be sustainable as a community and have trees in every property to go forward would be an asset, I think, for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you for this, Renee, and all the work you did on this. And I just want to emphasize what Director Ryan just mentioned. This may seem like an issue that's probably not worth dealing with, spending a lot of time on, but these are town assets, and they are the value. If you put the total value of our trees together, then I think you're dealing with a substantial amount of money, and I'm sure we might have that figure somewhere. But it deals with a lot of money, so it's a good thing to have. So 2 quick questions. I'm back on that first paragraph that Councillor Bauer was talking about, but just a little bit earlier, and I'll read from the 2 prohibit the planting of public trees on without the town's consent.
Oh,
Is that on public property?
on public property, on town land.
Which is it?
I would say on town land.
On town land?
That's what the rest of the wording is
Okay.
within the bylaw. My apologies.
No, that's okay. And I'm going to need some help learning about 5.9. That's one section that I'm not quite sure I understand. No person shall use a public tree to secure any object to a public tree.
This might be an oversight. Sorry, through the chair. No person shall use, I think it was any object, or shall not secure any object to a public tree is what it's supposed to actually read as. No person shall secure any object to a public tree. So by that means what the intent was, and sorry for the typo.
Sorry.
What the intent was is that we don't want people coming and punching holes with nails with signs or securing, I don't know, lines to dry clothing, towels, whatever, on a public tree.
So
That
no
also
person shall
includes-
secure any object to a public
to
tree.
a public tree. That was the intent of that. That was in regards to, so that's why I put, there was one exception that I talked to Donna about it being 5.11. And in regards
Yes.
to strings of lights for Christmas,
Yes.
obviously the intent is not to prevent people from decorating for Christmas. If they want to decorate their public trees, they definitely can. They're not allowed to put nails in their public trees in
Right.
that intent, but they can definitely decorate them in other ways so that we still have that spirit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And thank you very much, Renee, for your work on this. I'm not as kind of picky as my fellow councillors, so I won't be pointing out all these little tiny errors.
Thank you.
Just jealous. Yeah, exactly.
Damn it. Can you give me an idea of like what, like let's say an older, bigger tree, like value-wise might be, like on the higher end in town?
Through the chair, we haven't done an inventory, so I would have to go out with Donna to actually evaluate using the criteria to assess the tree values. I do know that with my time at City of Calgary and dealing with the Parks Department there, they had trees that were worth well over $100,000. So it depends on the sizes of a tree and how old it is, how large it is, the rarity of the species. So in dealing with their arborists, we did assess trees that were quite a significant amount of money.
Yeah, that's the impression that I was under, and so I want to, I guess, give fair warning to the public that there's a possibility they could be really getting themselves into big trouble if they happen to, harm the wrong tree in town. So people should be careful. The other thing I was going to say is I happen to have a copy of the Communities in Bloom map that has most of the heritage trees on it, and so I did send it to you, so you can have that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a scintillating reading book called Historic Trees in Alberta. It was published in 2008. And Strathmore is in there for some of their heritage trees, and particularly for something called a Siberian elm, which I don't think has shown up on the list, but I'm pretty sure it still exists. I have a picture of it south of the highway. And Siberian elms are really, really important. They're one of those really important trees because they're one of the Asian elms that are resistant to Dutch elm disease. It's not completely resistant, but it has a way, way higher resistance than other trees. And when arborists were first studying how to reduce susceptibility of Dutch elms, they were out here. So that was in the early 90s, and they were looking at the Siberian elms that were in the community and looking for them and doing some genetic testing around that. So that was kind of cool. I also want to thank you for the work that you've done, and thank Councillor Montgomery for pursuing this issue relentlessly. It's important, and I'm really glad that it's here. And also thanks to Communities in Bloom for seeing it through. And Your Worship, as soon as Councillor Cox had a chance to talk, I'm ready to move the...
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Cox?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, I wasn't here for the June meeting, so I wasn't
privy.
to the information. But I somewhat understand why we're prohibiting people from planting trees on public land. But I'm not really all that convinced on penalizing them $300 for planting a tree on public land. So I guess I want some justification there. Like, I understand that we're trying to control the type of tree, we're trying to do certain things, but to fine somebody for buying a tree and planting it on public land seems a little like we're punishing them for doing us a favor.
I can help you on that.
Through the chair, there's actually a method, so there is a clause that says that they can, as long as they have the approval.
Permission?
Yes, exactly.
Permission.
So if they have approval of the director, or of operations, then I specifically said of our director, they have something in writing, they can plant trees in the public realm. So that's something we did want to make sure that people could still do. We just wanted to make sure that they had permission to do it, so that if they say, hey, we were proposing to put a tree in this specific location, it's not on top of a utility right away, or something that perhaps would cause an issue.
Or a northwestern poplar that's like a large noxious weed.
Yeah. Or a tree perhaps that if they plant in, say, a boulevard, is going to have a canopy that impedes traffic. Or those are issues that we would want to look at before they were able to plant it there.
I'm still not convinced about the penalty. I mean, it's simple, right? You see a tree, our Public Works goes out, they see a tree, it's planted in a meridian. You know, again, I get it. I don't want a tree that's this huge. I totally understand everything about why you want them to have approval. But if that tree's there, we pull it out. We can choose to put it somewhere else, and it's now our tree, and well, $300?
Correct. Through the chair, that was the intent, was that it then costs man hours and town's hours to remediate that tree and plant it somewhere else. And if it hasn't been planted appropriately, then there is a chance that it would be damaged, or so that's the kind of things we're trying to educate. And I think that was the intent, is that it does cost money to then go and have someone take that out and replant it somewhere else.
All right.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I would move that council give first reading to bylaw number 19-18, tree protection bylaw.
We have a motion on the floor. All in favor? And passed. Who's up next? Oh, Councillor Bauer.
I move that council, thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give second reading to bylaw number 19-18, tree protection bylaw.
We have a motion on the floor. Any discussion? Oh, Jen? Okay, shut your mic off.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there were some minor amendments, so perhaps the motion should read it as amended.
I gladly change mine.
I'll change mine as well.
Okay.
First reading as amended.
Okay, we're good. Okay, second motion is on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor? Passed. Councillor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give unanimous consent to a third and final reading of bylaw number 19-18 with amendments, or I'm sorry, 19-18 tree protection bylaw with amendments.
We have all in favor? Motion passed. And Councillor Montgomery.
I will move that council give third reading. Oh,
With, no,
just-
we did
did
unanimous
consent.
consent to do
So
it third.
third reading now? Okay.
As amended?
Yes, so I'll move that council give third reading to amended bylaw 19-18 tree protection bylaw.
All in favor? Motion passed. He said that in the middle of it. 12.2, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment 1910. Same thing, isn't it? Councillor Cox?
Your Worship, I recommend that council give first reading to bylaw number 19-10, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment.
All in favor? Motion passed. Councillor Peterson?
Sorry,
Oh.
no, go ahead, I just wanted to look at something first. Somebody else maybe.
Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council give second reading to bylaw 19-10, Community Standards Bylaw Amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion passed. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that council give unanimous consent to a third and final reading of bylaw number 19-10 Community Standards Bylaw Amendment.
All in favor? Motion passed. Councillor Sobel?
And I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 19-10 Community Standards Bylaw Amendment.
All in favor? Motion passed.
Thank you, Renee. Thanks, Renee.
Nothing in urgent business? Okay. Questions between councillors and councillor statements? Councillor Peterson?
I just have PSAs, Your Worship. May 9th, 2020 is the Steering Towards Hospice. Will be held in Standard this year, just to mark on your calendars. And it is a change from what their earlier date was. And also, just a thank you to ATCO for the complimentary invitation to the Scotties Invitational. I really appreciate that ATCO did that, and all the other value-added things that they've brought to community. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I didn't mention before was that the Hospice Society sits at the table at Wheelan Housing Management Board and had applied under the ministry legislation process for membership to that board. So we were advised by the region that that is well into the works now, and they probably will have a seat at that table in the fairly near future, and that will give them that having them at that table as a full-fledged member is relevant to future requisition for the hospice. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to give a shout out to Councillor Montgomery. He received recognition at our Wheatland Regional Partnership meeting this week. His video that he's been doing has reached Councillor or Mayor Joe Peterson's eyes, the Mayor of Standard, and yeah, I don't want to get that wrong. And Councillor Montgomery, I just want to say thank you for going out and being bold and doing something different. This council hasn't had anyone with that type of experience in terms of videography before, and I love that you've used Piper to help you, and that you've been making public announcements for the pathway. Good job, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Bauer. I really appreciate that. And I guess to I'll say, like, I will be releasing another video about our pathway system in the near future that will just kind of highlight what a great amenity we have access to. And then I also wanted to thank Waste Management for their donation to Communities in Bloom. They gave a grant that will be used to enhance our station gardens, which is the kind of little treed area next to the library. So thank you very much to Waste Management.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Any administrative inquiries? No? All right, looking for a motion to go back in camera.
Let's so move, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. All in favor? Move back in camera at 9 o'clock.